Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon, and today we are looking at Sableye Garbodor with good old Time Puzzle. Probably the best fatigue deck we've ever seen. Definitely the best fatigue deck to my memory. I've been playing for about 5-6 years, so this is a very powerful deck for Expanded, and it pretty much has a way of winning against almost anything, even people trying to hard counter you. Sableye Garb has ways within the deck to still win those matchups. So let's have a look at the deck now and discuss why this is such a powerful deck for Expanded. And there's been a lot of controversy over this sort of combination of cards. This whole deck is a concept, basically. A lot of people have been asking for bans, nerfs, all these other things, because this deck seems to be near enough unbeatable. It has a game plan against every deck in the format currently. And even if people are trying to come up with new decks to try and hard counter Sableye, I've definitely taken a lot of time to think about ways of beating Sableye Garbodor, and I'll get onto those sort of things later on. But even then, I feel like Garbodor Sableye still has outs in the deck to still win those matchups, even if they are on paper auto losses. So here we go. It's all about Sableye. We're playing 4 of this card. I think we're only playing 2 4-ofs in the whole deck. Sableye, obviously one of them. It's our main attacker. It's our only attacker basically in the deck. 70 HP basic Pokemon that has 2 attacks. One is Confuse Ray, which does 10 damage. Flip a coin if heads. The defending Pokemon is now confused. This is actually a decent option if we are dealing with Seismitoad. One of the best ways people are going to try and deal with Sableye is Seismitoad, because as you can see, the whole deck basically is based around these stally trainer cards. So people using Toad are going to try and shut that off. So we do have this Confuse Ray attack, which can sometimes confuse them. Oftentimes Seismitoad players are reliant on Keldeo Floatstone. Well, we have Garbodor, so sometimes we can stop that. So Confusion is actually a relevant attack for this guy. It's just one other thing that makes Sableye even better somehow. But the attack you're going to be spamming almost every turn. You may as well get used to the name. Junk Hunt, you get to put 2 item cards from your discard pile into your hand. This is obviously phenomenal. It's been phenomenal for a long time, but now from the new set we have had the introduction of Puzzle of Time, which if we play the combination of 2 Puzzle of Time at the same time, we get to find 2 of any card from our discard pile and put them into our hand. So why is this so good with Sableye? Well, when I initially thought this, I thought the power level was ridiculously good. Now I think it's only a slight improvement on the old Junk Hunt, in my own opinion. Well, it's definitely a big improvement, but it's not as gigantual as some people have been saying. The main difference, in my opinion, from being able to Junk Hunt, you know, a VS Seeker and a Hammer back, rather than 2 Time Puzzle, is because you get to be retroactive now. You get to respond to what your opponent's doing every time with Puzzle of Time, because you get 2 puzzles back with Junk Hunt, your opponent takes their turn, then you puzzle for the 2 things you need. So for example, in the past, you might Junk Hunt and think, what's my opponent going to do next turn? Is he going to attach an energy? Okay, I'll get back a Crushing Hammer. Okay, so then you Junk Hunt for 2 Crushing Hammer, let's just say for argument's sake. Now we get to take 2 Puzzle of Time. If they did get those energies attached, you can still Puzzle of Time to find those Crushing Hammers. But now if they didn't and just passed, we get to use Puzzle of Time for other things that can disrupt them further. Stuff like Trick Shovels to help us mill more cards. We have the luxury of getting extra things, extra Life Dews, extra Tool Scrappers, whatever else we need that turn. So the first big thing for Puzzle of Time, why it's so powerful now with Sableye, is because we get to be retroactive. We always know exactly what we want at the time. Whereas in the past, we Junk Hunt thinking what our opponent would be wanting to do the following turn, and sometimes you could whiff cards, basically. Your Junk Hunt would be a useless Junk Hunt. Like, if you expected them to drop a DCE to kill you, maybe you would hunt back the Enhanced Hammer, then it's wasted in the hand. But now with Puzzle of Time, you're always getting the things you want on that turn. So it's a lot better in terms of sequencing for you. The other reason Puzzle of Time is so insanely good is the Life Dew combo. We all know what this is. So we have a Life Dew on Sableye. Sableye gets knocked out. We promote a new Sableye, Puzzle of Time twice, get 1 card and the Life Dew, put the Life Dew back onto Sableye. So basically, anything that isn't playing either Trainer Lock or some other way of stopping Life Dew, there are a few that I'll get into, we can basically cycle Life Dew the entire game. As long as we don't like prize either of these things. We have to bear in mind that these are possibilities. But basically we can cycle Life Dew all game. Now that means our opponent has to take 6 prizes by Lysandring, or using Xerosic to get rid of the Life Dew, or other things, you know, just to make Life Dew not a problem. So this is absolutely incredible. Such a ridiculous combo. So many turns of prize denial, on top of the amount of hammers and other things we're going to do to make it awkward for them to attack. Just even if they are able to just take the attack, you've got Life Dew on anyway, so it feels very, very pointless for the most part. So this is the biggest 2 things that Puzzle of Time offers the deck, and why it's on just a slightly higher power level than it was in the past. We've seen it be probably within the top 10 decks of the last expanded sort of regionals. It's been more of a rogue deck. A lot of people are worried that it can't win in time and stuff like that. It still has all those issues, but now it's just much more of a dominant force of Puzzle of Time at its disposal, especially with Delinquent as well, another new card that it gets, which also makes it incredibly good. So Sableye does gain 2 very important cards from the new set, which makes it something that was a good deck that was rogue to probably the top of tier 1 in my opinion right now. So it's a very, very strong deck, all based around junk hunting. If you haven't figured out by now, junk hunt does no damage, so we're trying to fatigue our opponents, like I said at the start of the video. Fatiguing is slightly different to the mill approach. Milling is when you're using something like Durant, and you're going to take as many cards out of the opponent's deck in like quick succession. Like Durant tries to take 4, 5, 6 cards out of their deck per turn, depending on, you know, adding in ninjasks or trick shovels and stuff like that. Here, we're trying to fatigue. We're trying to get rid of every energy our opponent plays, and every now and then we're going to throw in a trick shovel if we have the luxury. But for the most part, we're making sure that they can't take 6 prizes, and their deck will run out before that happens. So it's a slightly different approach to something like Durant, but this is by far the best fatigue strategy we have overall, to be honest. We are playing one other like pseudo Sableye. It used to be 2 or 3 of these Bunnelby in the deck, but I feel like now we only need 1, especially because we have Puzzle of Time that can recycle Pokemon so nicely. It gets straight back into our hand. We can just play 1 of these guys. I still like having the option for this, mainly for mirror matches more than anything else, because you can burrow sometimes. There'll be times in Sableye mirrors when your both players' decks are like below 10, and if you can really start putting pressure on with Bunnelby, it can be very awkward for them. And also we have the added recovery power of Rototiller. If we are item locked and we can't use Super Rod or something like that, this can help us out from decking ourselves. And we can put back energy or disruption supporters, stuff like that. So yeah, it's good to be aware of him. We rarely ever use him, to be honest, only in very specific circumstances, but he's a very good lifeline to have, basically. We are playing 2 of the Noble Victories Trubbish that has Garbage Collection. Allows us to put 1 card from the discard pile on top of the deck. So all of our cards, the Sableye, the Trubbish, and the Bunnelby, they all have a way of getting something back as like a recycle tool, basically, so that we can try and get these things back from the discard pile. The whole deck works from the discard pile, and we fish stuff out of there and then continue to replay them whenever they're useful. And then we are playing 2 Garbodor. This could be the new or the old. It really doesn't matter. They have the same HP, the same weakness, the same retreat cost. We'll never attack with either of them. So I've just gone for this one just because it's current and stuff like that. And yeah, the Garbotoxin ability, if we have a tool attached to Garbodor, every other ability, well, no one else has an ability other than Garbotoxin, as long as he has the tool attached. So why are we playing Garbodor? Well, it's pretty simple. Otherwise, stuff like Blastoise could flood the field of energy, and we are trying to fatigue, like I keep saying, and we are reliant on Crushing Hammer to stop getting hit in the face every turn. So we want to stop Blastoise, shut down Bronzong, shut down pretty much every ability-based energy accelerator. They can all be issues for us. Additionally, Keldeo Floatstone is a combo that so many decks are playing right now, even stuff like Dark Cloak from Darkrai. You want to shut those down because then chunky things stay chunky and we can stall with Lysandres. Especially the case because we have Aqua Secret Base to increase the retreat cost as well. So Garbodor shuts off typical ways that people get around retreating. Garbodor stops that Keldeo and the Darkrai and stuff like that. So very important as a 2-2 in this deck. Finally, for Pokemon, it's all pretty simple. We're playing one Shaymin to help us set up. Pretty simple stuff. We have very few actual draw supporters in this deck. We have 3 Sycamore, 2 N. I guess Ghetsis counts as a draw supporter in some ways. AZ only counts when we have either Shaymin or Jirachi really. So we are very reliant on Shaymin in the first turns. Definitely these Ultra Ball then become good, because one of the things this deck can actually lose to is just having bad hands. There's a lot of things that are really clunky early on, definitely if you don't find compressors early. So we're really reliant on getting Shaymin into good cards, and mainly bench Pokemon is the first thing we look for with the deck. The rest all sort of comes together in a matter of 2 to 3 turns. But the 2 to 3 turns is where we are at our most vulnerable as the Sableye player. So Shaymin's going to help us get around that and get into as many cards as possible. Similarly, Jirachi EX, being able to Stellar Guidance is pretty huge. For stuff like Archiestoise, you want to Stellar Guidance Hex Maniac, so that you can have the turn 1 ability lock, and then from there, hopefully you've been able to establish Garbodor turn 2, and then they never have the Blastoise online, and maybe they weren't even able to Archie into it because we've used that Hex. It's a lot more awkward for them to get Archie when they don't have stuff like Jirachi or Shaymin at their own disposal. So that's pretty good for us. We can also get cards like Ghetsis for other matchups. Ghetsis is actually ridiculous in the mirror. That's the main reason I play Ghetsis. It's just going to help us find more cards, basically. This could be a flip-flop of just like 2 Shaymin, but I like the versatility of Jirachi in here because, you know, it's going to be live for a lot more of the game, and definitely the best option turn 1. So yeah, pretty good stuff there. I'm happy with the 1-1 split, to be honest. Now, let's get into the trainers. The first one I want to talk about is Super Rod. I'm playing 2 Rod in this deck. A lot of Sableye Guard players are happy with 1. I think I have only ever lost games so far by prizing Super Rod. I don't think I've lost a game when I've not prized the Rod. That's pretty much plain and simple. You can win if you have prized Super Rod, but it's just way, way harder for you. I think save yourself a whole lot of headache. Just have 1 dead card in your deck so that you are way less likely to prize this card, because then every other game is just going to go so much nicer for you. So by all means, go down to 1 Super Rod if you want to. You can get by just rototillering your way back in for like 5 turns or something like that. But you really don't want to do that. That's how you let your opponent back into the game. Let's not do those things. Let's have 2 Super Rod. Let's be safe, guys. And it's also ridiculous for Mirror as well. It's also going to edge the Mirror, in my opinion, as well. Having 1 Bunnelby and 2 Super Rod makes you way more impervious to your opponent's milling approach, because you can recycle twice as much in a turn. So yeah, pretty cool. So that's one of the biggest items we have. Next up, we have the hammer approach. This is one of the best ways we fatigue things, of course. We're going to deny prizes with the Life Dew, and then we're going to stop people taking prizes each turn just by hammering away all their energy. So 1 enhanced allows us to get rid of a special, guaranteed, and then 3 crushings because we need to get rid of basic energy at the same time. You'll notice we don't need 4 odds of anything. We have lots of lower counts of a whole bunch of things just to give us an array of options, really. We only need 3 crushing hammers because we'll keep re-spamming 1 or 2 at a turn. So you never need the full 4 count, because even on turn 1 you don't need to hit 4 crushing hammers. You just need to look for maybe 1 or 2. Most of the time we're going to rely on Battle Compressor. It's our main consistency card, which I'll get on to later. Let's look at some more disruptive options. We are playing Tool Scrapper. That's going to help us get rid of tools on our opponent's things. Again, Keldeo Floatstone, like before we've set up Garbodor, you can get rid of that, throw a Headringer on instead, so that even if they are going to kill our Garbodors or get rid of Garbotoxin for a turn, they still can't rush in, or they have to pay like DC retreat cost. Again, it combos nicely with hammers, so that their EX Pokemon have an extra attack cost. Just going to make it a lot more awkward for them. So Tool Scrapper provides us those sorts of things. In general, it's just a really nice card as well. You can also get rid of stuff like Life Dew in mirrors, really random situations, but it's not really going to be a big factor. It's mainly just for getting rid of tools. We still have Xerosic in here for that sort of thing, but this is a surefire way in a trainer to do it for us. Another huge card in the deck is the single Trick Shovel that we play. Trick Shovel is the go-to option if you have nothing else to do in your turn. So this is one of the things I alluded to at the start when I said why Puzzle of Time is better than just Junk Hunt in general, like how it improves Junk Hunt so much more. So now if our opponent draw passes, we can double puzzle and still get value from our 2 puzzles, because we can get something like Trick Shovel to accelerate our speed at which we win games, because we've milled an extra card basically. Additionally, this works really nicely with the combo red card Delinquent, putting them down to 1 card in hand, and then we could use Trick Shovel to manipulate their top deck. If it's a good one, we get rid of it. It's a bad one, we let them take it. So once we get into a cycle like that, Trick Shovel is something you take almost every turn with Time Puzzle, because you can get them into an infinite lock basically. So it's an absolutely huge one-of in here. I've actually considered 2 of, but then I'd have to go to 2 ofs of like the red card, the Delinquent, the Stadium to make it work. And there's not the space for that, so I'm happy with 1 Trick Shovel to be honest. So we've gone over the hammers, gone over most of the disruption cards. Let's talk about the red card here. Red card is a huge card. Not only turn 1, you're quite happy to see this to give them down to 4 cards, but this is one of the ways that we can beat even the worst of matchups basically. Think about something like Groudon, okay? Groudon has barrier, so we can't use hammers, we can't Lysandre him up. We can't do anything to Groudon. We can't stop him just attaching 4 energy and smashing us in the face every turn. But with red card plus Delinquent, we can put him down to 1 card, and then he's not drawing into those 4 energy. It still takes a while for him to get set up, right? So every turn that we've gained thanks to red card Delinquent, is a turn that he's not attacked us, and every turn that he's not attacking us is an extra turn that he top decks a card, so that's 1 off of his deck, and we can also Trick Shovel for another card off of his deck. So the red card Delinquent combo gives us this insane way of just winning even the most difficult of matchups, in my opinion. So that's why we play red card. Normally the combo is you red card first, then use Delinquent. We only play 1 Stadium in here, but again we can recycle it with Time Puzzle. The dream is you have double puzzle and VS Seeker in hand, so you can go double puzzle, play the Stadium, red card Delinquent, and then you've played all 3 in 1 turn. That's the dream, right? So obviously your opponent sometimes will play a Stadium, some decks are very reliant on it. Stuff like Trevenant are very reliant, Toad decks love putting in their Stadiums. Just a lot of things will naturally play Stadiums to lower the hand size for Shaymin in turn 1 and stuff like that. So you can sometimes catch your opponent's Stadium and get value out of Delinquent there. But oftentimes you're going to have to hit this wombo combo. But it just gives you this option of winning games that you have no business winning. Stuff like Groudon. I've been able to stall like 10 turns against a Groudon player, and then at that point they don't have enough time to beat me. Just because I red card Delinquented, and then every time I Time Puzzle from then on, I go for Trick Shovel, and I look at the top card. Is it a bad one? Yes, they can have it. If not, I kill it. So every time they're like losing a lot more cards from the Trick Shovel, they sometimes can still draw out of it if they have 2 good quality cards in a row stacked on their deck, but a lot of the time it's difficult for that to happen, so pretty good stuff. And then every other turn after that, we can Delinquent once they're back up to 3 cards, so we can then go for Delinquent plus Stadium. We don't even need to hit the red card, so you get into a cycle where they are constantly on 1 card top deck mode, and it's just insane. It's just the most nuts thing I've ever seen in Pokemon. It's just ridiculously good. So just 3 one-offs in this deck gives us the way to beat every deck, in my opinion. If you hit this combo off, there is no deck around enjoys that. There's nothing that can just play from what is on the board, especially against Sableye Garbodor, because we wipe out their board. We get rid of all the energy, we Lysandre around heavy things, we just make it so awkward for them. No deck will inherently have the board state in a good way against Sableye Garbodor, so also being able to access their hand so easily now as well, something Sableye Garbodor never really had. Some people would try and Sky Return bounce around you, hold the DC every turn. Now we just red card Delinquent, get out of here. You're not having that sort of option against us anymore, and we can buy ourselves a whole bunch of turns with this combo. So that's me covering the red card, the Delinquent, and the Aqua base all in one. Just in general, Aqua base is the best one we have because it increases the retreat cost of 1 for everything. We don't mind retreating at all. We rarely will be retreating. We have float stones, we have AZ. It's never a problem for us. But if we Lysandre stuff up, it can sometimes cost ridiculous amounts of energy, even to move single retreat cost Pokemon, which otherwise would be easy for them. The Aqua base makes it very bad for them, which is pretty good for us. So even though this is more than just a trigger for Delinquent, although a lot of the time it will be just that, it has the added value of the actual effect that the card has, so not just a blank Stadium basically. Okay, let's look at the consistency trainers now. So that's all the combo pieces. I've talked about Puzzle of Time enough. Turn 1, you can just play Puzzle of Time. You can play as a single card, you don't mind. Just get out of the hand for an extra an extra Shaymin. It's absolutely fine, especially because our setup is so weak. Puzzle of Time is actually a good item for us to draw early game. It's just a one-off, because even looking at that top 3, we're getting a Shaymin for like 1 or 2 cards that can really improve our outs. So play it early, because you're always going to recycle it. They're great at any point in the game. They're absolutely fantastic. But, you know, for the most part, it's junk hunt for these two, like every turn. Talking so much about Sableye. Right, okay. 3 Battle Compressor is one of the best ways we can remain consistent with this deck. Normally, we're just going to compress away. First thing we compress, 2 Puzzle of Time. Next thing we compress, probably Life Dew. It's either going to be Life Dew, Hammers, or whatever supporter you want, basically. You don't necessarily have to put the puzzles in straight away, but most people will if they have a decent hand. If they have a bad hand, you might want to go instantly just to hit stuff like Hammers, you know? Because basically if you have a good hand, you have the ability to compress away the puzzles, right? Because you know you're going to keep digging and probably hit stuff like Hammer. If you have a bad hand and you know you're not drawing much, you just get away the instant Hammers so that you can slow your opponent down until you draw into a better hand. That being said, you can also get rid of supporters to then make VS Seeker live and all that sort of stuff. But basically, Compressor is going to get rid of everything, and then Junk Hunt gets it all back. Pretty simple stuff. Absolutely fantastic. Throw everything in the discard pile, so if we are hit with an N, bear in mind we're not taking prizes, so we're only ever taking 6 cards from an N. So even N isn't even a threat for us, really. We will be, the whole deck will be in the discard pile, basically, and we'll just recycle those via Time Puzzle. Compressor makes that all happen. Fantastic. 3 VS Seeker. I feel like we don't need 4 because Time Puzzle is basically a VS Seeker every turn if we need it to be. But it lets us do these wombo combos where we red card Delinquent and base all in one turn. And it's also a great turn 1 play because we don't have many draw supporters. So having the Compressor VS Seeker combo really helps us out there. So I think 3 is the right number. The only other 4 of in our deck is Ultra Ball. I've said how we are weak in the early turns because we haven't got everything going. Well, we need to max out Ultra Ball so we can actually get everything going. There's an argument for playing potentially 1 Level Ball, 3 Ultra Ball. I think that's not terrible. But I think just having the extra physical out just for Shaymin is so important that you need to just play 4 Ultra, to be honest. I think that's absolutely fine. I know the Level Ball can get you Jirachi, but you know, I think 4 Ultra Ball is probably the way to go, just because Shaymin turn 1 is so important for you, and you also, in some matchups, you need to hit Trubbish turn 1, hit Garbodor turn 2, it's simple as that. So you need to get into these Ultra Balls to get into our Pokemon so that we don't just bench ourselves out in like the first 2 turns before we can establish a real locky aspect, and so that we can get into Shaymin. Pretty simple stuff. The only other 4 of in the deck. By the way, the reason why we don't need like 3, like we don't need 4s of anything else is because we just recycle. Pretty simple. Right, 1 AZ, so that we will never be like catcher stalled or anything. We have 3 Floatstone in the deck anyway, so it's going to be rare that we will get stalled. But sometimes you might have to do funky plays like Tool Scrapper away your Floatstone, puzzle back Floatstone, attach Floatstone and retreat. You can do those sorts of plays if you need to get out, but things when you are like sleeping under Hypnotoxic Laser, you need to hit AZ. So yeah, 1 AZ, great for us there. Also helps us reuse Shaymin, stuff like that. Delinquent, we've been over it. It's not only good just with the red card, you can use it in general. If they're just doing nothing and you think they're sitting on a hand, just Delinquent, force them, just sort of see what they're happy to get rid of, and then you can assess what they have in their hand. Ghetsis is huge for the mirror match. This is something that you probably have to tech for, to be honest. So techs we have, obviously Bunnelby, 2 Rod and Ghetsis. I think we have a fairly decent mirror match. Also, just in general, this is a great disruption card. You can limit their hand size to then Delinquent the following turn, stuff like that. Just really good for us. 1 Hex, it's absolutely huge for anything ability based because we want to establish it turn 1 and then Garbodor from turn 2 onwards. That's the dream. So Hex Maniac, pretty good for that. Just in general, Hex is awesome. We are playing the 1 Lysandre, of course. Lysandre's absolutely crazy. For the stalling approach, we have the +1 retreat cost and things. We're getting rid of Keldeo thanks to Garbodor. Just stalling anything, forcing them to pay more energy just to move out of the active, because then the next turn we can just Lysandre it back up again. It leaves them pretty much in a catch-22 situation where they spend the energy, they know we're going to Lysandre them again. It basically forces them to hit AZ on every single Pokemon in play. Until like they're left with just 1 lone Pokemon. So basically players can't just They just can't bench stuff against this deck because they're always going to get punished just by having one Lysandre in here. 2N, we shuffle draw and always draw 6, so it's always a strong draw card for us. It's a great turn 1 option as well. We only have, like, I consider these to be the only really good turn 1 options. Ghetsis is a risk. Like, normally Ghetsis is like 2 to 3 on average, I would imagine. And you wouldn't play Sharon in the deck, so it's not technically a draw supporter. It's a disruption supporter. These are our only draw supporters. And it helps us recycle. Obviously, if you have had a rocky start and you've not found Life Dew for a while, maybe even if Life Dew's prized, you can use N to disrupt their hand as best you can, force them to shovel back in while you get a fresh hand, which is pretty nice. 3 Sycamore, the most powerful, is probably our favourite as well because we like everything in the discard. Nothing is too important in the deck to be discarded because we can puzzle it back, get it back into our hand. So there's no downside to Sycamore in this deck. Pretty good stuff. We are playing 3 Flare Grunt. This is one of the biggest ways we deal with Seismitoad. So we have Confuse Ray at times if we need to. Probably the most surefire way is we're going to try and get rid of the Seismitoad's energy. And Seismitoad relies very heavily on 4 DCE and normally 3 to 4 basic energy, unless it's the Giratina version, in which case it will just play 8 specials, 7 or 8 specials, depending on player preference, basically. So having 3 Flare Grunt and 1 Xerosic allows us to literally kill every DCE that the Toad player has. So at some point they will not be able to Quaking Punch, that's just a fact. And then once they can't Quaking Punch, we win because we can just stop them fully. So 3 Flare Grunt, absolutely huge to get these early as well. This is often a good turn 1, turn 2 supporter. If you've already got cards from Shaymin, you've already set up your board, this is a great luxury to have. And it's one that you spam pretty much most turns because, like I say, we'll Lysandre around anything, and then if they start attaching to retreat or whatever, they've got back into their attacker, we can keep Flare Grunting each turn. So it's a guaranteed removal of an energy every turn. It's just pretty insane. Xerosic is the same thing, but for specials, he allows us to do it even if they're on the bench, which is great. He allows to get rid of tools as well, getting rid of tools from stuff like Seismitoad. Turn 1, if they've got a tool on board and like they've not used Punch because it's their first turn, we can Xerosic Headringer, and it's just pretty much GG from there. It's honestly just such a good supporter to have, and it's more versatile just having both of these instead of just straight up 4 Flare Grunts, so we may as well go for that. You could flip-flop to 2-2. I'm very happy with the 3-1 because this is very, very powerful in terms of round-the-board matchups. Against stuff like Mega Manectric, it's literally the case where if they have the things to deal with Life Dew and they're able to get the Mega turn 2 or turn something like that, if they're able to establish the Mega at any point, you can sometimes actually lose that game because their acceleration is from the discard pile. They will never run out of energy as long as they can continue to attack with 2 Megas, and they have free retreat as well, so it's really hard for us. So you need to Flare Grunt. You need to hit a Flare Grunt every turn against something like Manectric if they're playing the Mega. So these are very important. We need to play Aqua base. It's the best option we have, basically. 3 Floatstone, obviously needed for Garbodor, needed for moving everything else. Like I say, we have the funky plays of tool scrapping ourselves, finding it again, attaching it to anything. So we have universal free retreat. Life Dew is probably the biggest card in the deck. It is our ace spec. It's the way we win games because even if our opponent has been able to like withstand a torrent of hammers and a torrent of hand disruption, they're still not taking prizes because we have Life Dew. So yeah, that's pretty insane. 2 Headringer just adds to the whole disruption factor. Most things are EXs, to be honest, so Headringer, pretty much anything is great. Great against Toad turn 1 as well, just absolutely insane. And 6 Dark, we don't need any more than that at all. You just want to have a decent enough amount so that you can actually get into them. Oftentimes you can just compress one away, time puzzle it back if you really need to. So really, this could even be cut, in my opinion. It's just you want to have access to them when you're up against stuff like Toad. So I think 6 is probably the correct amount. So instead of going over other options for the deck, because this deck can have any number of options, to be honest, I think this is already like the most amount of options out of any deck that I've ever seen at its disposal already in terms of disruption. So I can't really go over any more options that you could play in this deck. Instead, we're going to look at some things that can try and deal with it. So Groudon is one of the first things I want to talk about. Groudon has Barrier, right? Let's look at this one. It's easier to read. So your opponent can't do anything to him, basically. He can't be lasered, he can't be hammered, anything like that. It's all fine. Groudon's cool. So basically all the Groudon player needs to do is attach 4 energy and then announce their attack every turn. If they can do that consistently, it's going to be very difficult for the Sableye Garbodor player, because even if they haven't got around the Life Dew, it means every turn you're pretty much getting back Life Dew and just 1 card instead of 2 cards. You can't disrupt them in any way, because normally they're going to be playing AZ or just like Robo Subs, so they can get rid of Robo Subs instead of being Lysandre around. Groudon is very difficult. How do we win against Groudon? Well, I've already said, just red card Delinquent combo so that they can't get into those 4 energy. Buy yourself as enough turns as possible. Similarly, there is the Regirock, which more people would probably splash into decks if they're worried about this card. Not that it's the most splashable card, it has a 4 energy attack cost anyway, so it's very similar to the Groudon. But the Groudon's harder to get set up, so yeah, Groudon's an option people will try and play. Your only out to winning that game is red card Delinquent. I think there's no other way you can do it, unless they are silly and don't play AZ and have benched things like the Wobbuffets, which can slow you down, or like it can buy you turns of Lysandre stall. Other than that, they should not have any way to lose that game unless they hit badly off of a red card Delinquent, which, you know, can happen. If you're using red card Delinquent every turn, one of those is going to come off good. They don't draw something like a Sycamore out of it, and they're stuck for a few turns, which is pretty big for us. So that's one thing. Toad is the next thing, right? Toad is huge. Toad is one of the things that people are saying, oh, Sableye Garb isn't going to be that good. We have Toad. Well, yes, but Toad is reliant on DCE. Even if you play basic energy in the Toad, there's a turn where you have to manually attach a basic energy, and you don't punch that turn. And then, like, the Sableye Garb player can just rush you with Scrapper, Headringer, Hammer. It's just going to be so bad for you as soon as you miss that one Quaking Punch. The one thing Toad has on its side is time. If you can put pressure on with Quaking Punch, even stuff like Muscle Band Giovanni, and actually kill Sableyes in 1 turn or even 2 turns, the deck is so clunky and full of items. If they've not been able to hit Compressors turn 1, it can be really rough for the Sableye Guard player, because they have so many dead cards. They need to literally hit all of their Grunts and Xerosic just to have a chance against you. I guess Lysandre counts as well. But if they can't do those things, then the Toad player will win, because Sableye's got low HP, easy to get killed, and you don't have the access to most of your disruption, which is basically why Sableye has all the disruption supporter cards to help balance out the Toad. So the Toad can beat us, but we have a lot of things in the deck to try and deal with the Toad itself. Next up is Trev. Trev, I think, is actually one of the hardest things to deal with. Trevenant has the ability that gets rid of items. So one of the things we can do is Hex Maniac, and then put a Floatstone onto Garbodor. That's one thing that then swings it straight back into our favour, and again we win. If we can't do those things, what do we really do? I guess you could Lysandre around Trevor, but the new Phantom has the attack that allows to evolve into Trevenant as well. So it needs very, very little to get a Trevenant turn 1. If they're going first, they can hit the Wally. If they're going second, they can just get 1 attachment or a Stadium to Ascension. And then the Trevenant Break, let's go back to it. Have I got one? I think I've given it to Jack. Well, the Trevenant Break attacks for 1 Psychic, 1 Colourless. So if they have their Stadium in play, that's just 1 Psychic energy. And it can spread around the board. And spread damage is a great way to get around Life Dew, because you can't Life Dew every Pokemon at once. So if you just take multiple prizes in a turn, maybe even if you can take everything out in a turn, you just win. So Trevenant having this spread damage can be really good. So I think this is one of the best ways of getting around Sableye. Garbodor, but Sableye Garbodor, again, it has the ways around it. You can Lysandre if they have anything on their bench. You can still Delinquent them every turn, because they have to play the D Valley most of the time. You can still use Hex Maniac, find the Floatstone. They've lost the lock. We're fine to do whatever we want. So, whoops. Even Trevenant, which I think is probably one of the best ways, can still definitely lose. Next up is Vileplume. Vileplume typically only plays 4 energy because it's playing Vespiquen. So even Lysandring stuff like Shaymin can be really big. Again, you can Hex Maniac and Tool Scrapper their Floatstone. I did that a couple of times over the last weekend against a Vespiquen player. That's when I was actually playing Yveltal, funnily enough. I Xerosic and then Lysandre. But this deck can do Hex Maniac, Tool Scrapper, or Xerosic, then Lysandre. It does have the outs, but again, if you get hit with it turn 1, you're probably going to lose because you don't find enough things to bench on that turn. So Vileplume Vespi is also one of the best ways of dealing with Sableye, in my opinion, because it can do it on turn 1, and it's just going to rush you for prizes quicker than almost any other deck. So it has the racing approach and it has the denial all on turn 1. So that's probably one of the best ways of dealing with Sableye Garbodor. But at the same time, it has this weak underbelly because it only has 4 energy. So if at any point in those like 5 turns you can hit one of those combos, you'll just win the game as well. So Sableye can win against everything, basically, is what I'm trying to say. Right, next up, let's talk about Spiritomb. This is a pretty much forgotten card. Each player can't play any Ace Spec cards from his or her hand. So Life Dew doesn't work, and you can just kill everything. But wait, it's an ability, so Garbodor shuts it off. Well, yeah, that's true. But what if something played Archeops? If you play Archeops and Spiritomb, you can just ignore Life Dew and play the deck as if you were up against just Sableye Garbodor of the past. Time Puzzle still is good, but it's no way as good when it's not recycling Life Dew. So Archeops with Spiritomb is actually a great way. Once again, though, it's like the Trevenant fiasco where you can go Hex, then attach a tool to Garbodor, and then you're back straight in the driving seat. The Spiritomb gets shut off, Life Dew works all over again, you're all fine. Even if you just play like Lysandre to kill Garbodor and then just have Spiritomb in the deck, one Spiritomb can really help you out against Life Dew. So I feel like Spiritomb might be finding its way into Expanded in certain decks that really struggle against this. So yeah. Right, what's next on my list? So many things that I've had to talk about. The next one is Beignet. This is, I think, worse than the Spiritomb because it's a stage 1 and it's multiple Pokemon that you have to play. But every tool in play has no effect. Why is this slightly better sometimes than what's it called? Spiritomb? It's because you can just bring up something like the Jirachi or the Shaymin or even the Bunnelby. This is the best target because it's DC retreat cost. And they can attach Floatstone but they can't retreat. It takes them a while to retreat out of there. So that can sometimes be better. But the whole point, again, is to shut off Life Dew more than anything else. I think Spiritomb's better, but Beignet is another option you could look towards. But once again, Garbodor can attach the tool. Even though the tool has no effect, it still counts as a tool attached to Garbodor. So it's not quite perfect in my opinion. Right, now let's look at some other Pokemon. Manectric is a big one. Mega Man is probably one of the more difficult matchups. If this plays Spiritomb, I think this is one of the most difficult matchups for Sableye Garbodor. Because Turbo Bolt is reattaching the energy, so you can never run it out of energy. It's only 2 energy, and it has stuff like Mega Turbo that you can't shut off in this deck. So it will be able to, at one point in the game, get a Turbo Bolt going. And then if it can set up 2 Mega Manectric and just cycle between these two, it will never run out of energy. It can always hit enough to KO everything on your field. And if you have something like Sableye developed, not Sableye, Spiritomb developed, Lysandre up Garbodor, then you're killing Spirit Link. Not Spirit Link, what am I saying? Life Dew. You're killing Life Dew because you've got the Spiritomb in play. So something like Manectric with Spiritomb and like 2 Lysandre is probably going to be quite difficult for you. So that's probably going to be a more influential deck in the future, I think. Also because it can deal with it can already deal with Yveltal nicely. It can already deal with stuff like Trevenant, which could be coming into the format. So I think this is a new contender for Expanded as well. This is turning into a big discussion video about Sableye Garbodor, but I think this is really the only way I can discuss Sableye Garb, because it's not just 60 cards, it's a whole discussion-based video about how the hell do you beat this deck. And trust me, I'll be getting into some battles later, but I think I need to give this deck a lot of credit and a lot of time to discuss, because even if you argue with my 60 cards itself, I'm happy for that to be the case. Just hear me out and listen to what we can try and do against this deck, because like I keep saying, it has the ways to beat anything. So even the best counters, they're still sometimes not going to win against this deck, which is just insane. Right, Virgen's another one I'll talk about. Why did I type in Virgin? Virizion. Virizion's another card. It accelerates energy, so it has that. It comes out of the deck though, so it's worse than something like Mega Manectric. But we do have Genesect, which can red signal kill Garbodors. So if the Genesect player is playing Lysandre, you Lysandre up Garbodor, then kill it, and then from then on you can red signal around their Life Dew the whole game. because whenever they rebench a Trubbish, you can just go red signal again, kill it. And because Virizion has the acceleration, we have max elixir. It's way harder for the Sableye to deny that sort of amount of energy. So one of the best ways you beat Sableye is just flooding the field of energy so that the hammers will not work for like 5 turns. And that you got to make those 5 turns be KO, 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 KO basically. So just having a whole field of energy is one way that you can just beat down the Sableye Garbodor deck. And Virizion is one of the best ways because we have the red signal that can kill pretty much everything. With Muscle Band, I guess it kills everything. Once you kill the Garbodor, you have that to your disposal, so it's pretty big. And you have the acceleration of Virizion. So, I think I've talked about everything I wanted to talk about. So, the ways around Sableye. I've just discussed how this can beat anything, right? So bear that in mind. But if you want to try and counter Sableye, you need to play either a barrier Pokemon, which is Groudon or Regirock. You need to play Spiritomb as well as Lysandres, like multiple Lysandre, more than one. Because you need to first kill the Garbodor, and then you ignore the Life Dew from then on, because Spiritomb is not shut off. So that's one way around, just the Life Dew itself. One of the core things of Sableye Garb is just deal with Life Dew, and then have like a 1 energy attacker that can kill a Sableye each turn. Very difficult to do all those things at once, but this is something you can do. So I think Spiritomb Mega Man is one of the best ways. I think just playing Groudon on its own is a great way. Train Lock is great. Toad can be great. I think Vespiquen Vileplume is probably one of the best ways, and I think Trevenant is also a pretty good way as well. So all the Train Lock aspects are pretty good. Also, there's stuff like Ghetsis. Just playing Ghetsis can then get your opponent out of those time puzzles all over again. It can give you like a 6-7 card hand sometimes if they're really being greedy, and can set you up to the point where you have enough hand to deal with what they're doing for a few turns. You can hit those Lysandres, you can hit whatever else. So that's pretty important as well. So yeah, what else is there? Like I say, I think Mega Manectric is one of the best ways because it's energy acceleration that they can't shut off, basically. And it can, like, even if they get rid of all the energy on the field, you can go Mega Turbo Attach, Turbo Bolt, 4 energy into play all at once. And you're taking a knockout, even if you're not killing the Life Dew just yet. You're putting the initiative on them, and stuff like Lysandre kills Garbodor straight away. You're never going to run out of the energy. So that's my initial thoughts on Sableye Garb. I hope you like the list, and I hope you sticked around to listen to this long discussion. I didn't have it all. I had a couple of bullet points written down, so I hope this was all coherent and easy to follow. But I don't know. I don't know if this should be banned. Let's get some discussion going on down in the comments. I personally think it's fair, even though it is so ridiculously powerful. I think it's on a power level that can be countered, although at the same time it will still win. So even if we are playing these counters like Mega Man, Spiritomb, or like Groudon, it can still beat those decks, which is really bizarre to think about, because I've never looked at a deck and think, I can never counter this deck. There's always going to be some way to beat it, and there are ways to beat this deck, but even when you're playing a hard counter to it, it can still win just by scumming your opponent out of a good hand, because you've got Red Card Delinquent and the Stadium all at your disposal. And then you have Trick Shovel every other turn, so that they can never top deck out of their 1-card hand that's useless. So yeah, it's a very powerful deck for sure. It can be countered, but even the counters never always win. So it's a very good deck. I think that's the best way to say it. And because this has already been so long, I'll do some videos in another... No, I'll do some battles in another video. I'm also streaming as well, so we'll definitely profile this a lot, and I'll show it off because it's a very powerful expanded deck. So it's been Joe from OmniPoke. I've pretty much had my say on Sableye now, so I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time.